Hello again, and welcome back to another spiritual story time. Happy Halloween. Let's take a moment for this poison ivy look, can we? The story I'm going to be sharing today is actually a subscriber submission, and at their request, they wish to stay anonymous. I'm going to title this one, The Deathbed Confessional. Let's get into it. My daddy died in the winter of 2015. On his deathbed, my daddy had revealed to me that his surname wasn't actually Robinson, that his family was not originally from Chicago, that his last name was actually De Leon, and his family was originally from Louisiana. He didn't say specifically where in Louisiana. He didn't say if he still had family out there, and it didn't seem as though he wanted us to reconnect, to reach out, but it was something that my sister and I decided that we were going to do. A couple months later, through an ancestry searching website, I'd found a long-lost cousin that was still residing in the Baton Rouge area of Louisiana. So my sister and I decided that we were going to take a little trip out to Baton Rouge, and we were going to visit our cousin and see if we can learn more about our dad and his family and the De Leon bloodline. Fast forward a couple of months, because it took us a couple of months before we were actually able to book the flight and head out to visit our cousin. So fast forward a couple of months, we're now at the end of May. My sister and I go to visit our cousin. We tried to insist on staying at a hotel. We didn't want to inconvenience anybody. They are a long-lost family, but we don't really know them. However, Nathaniel was very insistent that we stay at his house for the duration of the visit. We arrived early Friday evening at our cousin Nathaniel's home. When we originally reached out to him, he had mentioned that he's mostly women on his side of the family and that they had all died early, that he was the lone survivor. He had a sister that died when he was 12. His mom had died during childbirth. His aunt had died a few years prior. His grandmother died when he was just 5 years old. There was a lot of death and a lot of women through the De Leon bloodline. But of course, women aren't the only ones that keep a bloodline going, you know? I'd asked him, well, what about my dad? Where does he fit in on this family tree? According to Nathaniel, he and my daddy were cousins, that his father was my daddy's great uncle, George. Daniel's dad is George. George is my daddy's great uncle. Okay. Sorry, I'm reading the story as I'm sharing it with you guys, so excuse the pauses. We originally intended to stay for only a weekend to try to just break the ice and get to know the family that we had in Baton Rouge. My sister actually had a work emergency arise early Sunday morning, and we were actually considering leaving and cutting our trip short a few hours. The work issue resolved itself basically as quickly as it presented itself, and so we didn't have to leave early. We allowed our cousin Nathaniel to talk us into staying for another week. We had the time, my sister had the PTO, so we said, let's do it. We ended up staying until the following weekend. Over the course of the weekend, taking us around town to see and experience the city as locals. I remember we stopped at a coffee shop on the corner, and cousin Nathaniel stopped to talk to a man on the corner that he knew. They were very hush-hush. My sister and I walked into the coffee shop. A woman who I assumed was the owner beckoned us over to her, and she kind of whispered over the counter. She said, you know, not everything is what it seems. We're like, okay, with the vague messages, and it's like, can you elaborate? And she says, people aren't always who they're pretending to be. I need to be sure and to double check before claiming blood ties. And I thought that this was strange and very specific. How would she know that we were relatives or related or any of that? My sister and I don't look alike, for the record. My cousin Nathaniel was a very fair-skinned black man, and both of us were fairly darker skinned. So one wouldn't necessarily assume that we were all family just by looking at us. When Nathaniel finally finished his conversation with the man outside of the coffee shop, he came into the coffee shop and he seemed very disturbed and in a hurry. He was eager to leave. We were still waiting to get our coffee, and he said that he had someone better and where we could get an even fresher cup brewed. So we left the coffee shop. Before we left the coffee shop, something told me to turn back and look, and I turned back and looked, and the owner of the coffee shop had this fretful look on her face, like if eyes could give a warning. My cousin Nathaniel claimed that he had to get back to his home, that he had things that he had to finish up on, and that we could continue with this little tour the following day. We returned back to his home, and he disappears upstairs to the attic for quite some time. And my sister and I are just kind of relaxing, exploring the home, because it's a really large house. Being from Chicago, we didn't have large homes like this. It was giving main house on the plantation vibes. And I immediately wondered what one person could be doing with all of this space. And as we explored the house that day, it felt very lived in. More lived in than one person could break in a home, if that makes sense. More lived in than if there was just one person living in the home. And so my sister and I were somewhere on the second floor where our sleeping quarters were when we heard a loud banging noise coming from upstairs. There's a 4-story home with the first floor, second floor, third floor, and then the attic. And we were staying on the second floor. My sister and I heard a loud banging noise coming from upstairs. Now I told you my cousin Nathaniel was up in the attic. he didn't hear us calling for him, calling down for him. Did you hear that? Are you okay? So when he didn't respond to our calls of concern, we decided to go up into the attic. No sooner did we reach the bottom of the stairs to the attic, my cousin Nathaniel appeared, rushing down the stairs as if to try to keep us out of the attic. And so now we're like, well, what's in the attic? Because after the warning the woman in the coffee shop gave us, and now we're hearing strange noises and he's not responding, and he's up to something in the attic. At this point, my sister wasn't with it anymore. She was ready to go. We had already extended our trip, so she's like, if we cut it short, we're not really losing anything, because we still ended up staying much longer. We learned a lot. We got to see some family photos, and I think I would be satisfied if it ended here. I wasn't so convinced. So I begged and pleaded with my sister to stay, not only to stay, but to help me figure out what was going on in the attic. So we go to sleep that night, and the next day we are heading out back into town so that we can meet some more acquaintances of my grandfather, my dad's dad, and just people who know the family, and just to hear the stories and get a better feel for them. I remember we were riding, and my cousin had this really old Toyota sedan. Don't remember the make or the model of the sedan. All I know that it was an old beat up burgundy Toyota, a 2-door car where you had to push the seat forward for people to climb in the back. He insisted on driving into town this time, although walking to town the last few days hadn't taken us that long. We weren't a long walk away from town, but he still insisted that we drive to town this day. As we're riding through town, he would make us stop to kind of rush into a store and leave out of the car without so much of a discussion, and wouldn't exactly invite us into the stores. After stopping at each of the stores, he would take whatever he brought out of the store and he would go directly to the trunk and put it away in the trunk before we could see what it was. So there was a couple of hours of this before we just, we decided, hey, we're hungry. What's there to eat around town? And his demeanor was different this day, because the last few days he was given the energy that he wanted to show us around town so that we could get the real authentic local experience. But today it seemed more so like a bother. Today it seemed more so like we were asking for too much. So his solution to this is say, well, I have some more running around to do. How about I take you guys back to the house? You guys can make lunch and relax, and when I finish up running my errands, we can actually go and head and do something fun, right? So that's the plan. He takes us back to his house, and I remember watching him drive off and hearing him drive off. His car was really raggedy and loud. As soon as he drove off, I said to my sister, we need to go up into that attic. She was reluctant at first. She was not trying to hear me. She did not want anything to do with the attic. But I convinced her somehow to stand at the bottom of the stairs of the attic and to keep watch. Let me know if she heard anything, saw anything, and I would abort mission. I go up in the attic, and it's not a lot of room to stand. It's not a standing room attic. It's like you have to crouch down, and I'm not a tall girl. I'm only 5'6", and so for me to have to crouch down in the attic, it made me wonder how my cousin Nathaniel was up here as long as he was comfortably. So I kind of squatted around and looked around and realized that there was nothing that stood out to me outrightly. There were a bunch of boxes, some old furniture, things covered in sheets. As I was getting ready to give up on my search and to head back down the stairs, I noticed a sliver of light coming from behind an old dresser pushed up against the wall in the corner. So I called my sister up into the attic to help me move the dresser. We slid the dresser away from the wall to reveal a teeny tiny door to a room that apparently had a light inside and was left on, and that's where the light was coming peeking through from the door. The door had a deadbolt and a padlock, so there was a lock built into the door and then an extra padlock put on to keep whoever out or whoever in. The locks looked old enough. I tugged at them for a while trying to get into the room, and no success. But on the last tug, I heard a snarl, a growl almost. It was not a human kind of sound coming out of the room. My sister and I pushed the dresser back in front of the door, and we immediately rushed out of the attic to act as if nothing had happened. We made lunch in case my cousin Nathaniel had came back, but he didn't come back for a few hours, almost closer to dusk. By the time that he returned, we weren't even interested in returning to town to sightsee at this point. He was overly apologetic for us spending the majority of the day inside and missing our opportunity to go sightseeing. So up until this point, we had only seen people around town that knew our grandfather and friends of the family, but we hadn't seen anybody that was directly a friend of Nathaniel's, which was starting to get weird. He said that he would show us around, we could meet some of his friends, so that intrigued me. My sister, on the other hand, was over it. She was ready to go. She was weirded out by the whole experience, and she kept pushing for us to leave. And I convinced her to stay one more night to see what he really had in store for us and if it was worth it. Fast forward to the middle of the night where we're trying to sleep and get some rest for the next day, and we kept hearing this weird scratching sound outside of the bedroom door, and we kept seeing the hallway light flicker off and on. So I had the bright idea to go out and investigate, and the second I reached the door and my hand hit the knob, the light in the hallway went out and it stayed out. The scratching on the outside of the door had stopped. I went ahead and opened the door anyway, and there was nothing there. The house was still. So I closed the door, went back to bed, and we went back to sleep. A few hours later, the sun was in the process of coming up, but it was still kind of dark outside. I saw something flash past my window. Let me remind you that this is a 4-story home and we were staying on the 2nd floor. It flew really fast and it was too large to be a bird. I had rolled over away from the window and I tried to alert my sister to what was going on. She kind of brushed me off and rolled over and went back to sleep. But then again, whatever it was that it flew past my window was now flying past her window. She saw something huge dart past the window and that woke her up and there was no more sleep to be had. So we both sat up contemplating what we wanted to do next. Her solution was to get the hell out of Dodge. My solution was I wanted some answers before we completely ghosted this side of our family. I had no intentions of returning here. I had no intentions of reaching back out to them or doing anything of the sort. So we had to get the information and we had to get it while we were here. That morning, since we were up so early, we heard our cousin Nathaniel wake up early, went downstairs to prepare breakfast, and we kind of just like stayed quiet and hid it in our room. Breakfast was ready. We came downstairs so that we could join him. And when we sat down to have breakfast and went to take a bite of the eggs that he had made us, they tasted disgusting. They were so sour and so bitter. It was weird because the food didn't smell bad. The food actually smelled really good, but the second I took a bite out of the food, no. It tasted bad enough for me to spit the food out and shocked, like, oh my God, what was that? And my cousin Nathaniel just kind of smirked and he's like, oh, too spicy for your big city taste buds? And I'm like, no, it's not spicy at all. It's sour. It's disgusting. My sister also was not feeling the food and she took a couple of bites, and once the taste registered, she too was opting out of eating his breakfast, which was weird because he had been cooking for us and serving us food the entire time and it was delicious. It was just this meal in particular that was just rancid and it wasn't going to work. So my sister and I, thanked him for the breakfast, and he talked a whole bunch about what he wanted to do for the day. Fast forward, we go upstairs to go get ready, and my sister is just like, I think he tried to poison us. I don't know what kind of voodoo hoodoo he got going on, but it ain't right and I think we should leave. And at this point, I was all out of excuses or reasons to try to change her mind. And I agreed, yeah, we need to get the hell out of Dodge. So setting up for a change of flight on our phones when he knocked at the door. Now, usually, since we had been staying there with the bedroom door closed, he hadn't knocked on our door. He generally just waited for us to come out into the common area. And so him knocking on the door while we were looking for flights felt really strange, like he knew what we were up to. We were able to switch our flights, and then I went to the door and I answered the door and let him know, yeah, we were just getting dressed and getting ready. And so he's like, oh great, I'm ready to head into town. And that's when we had to break it to him. We actually need to get back to our family. We stayed much longer than we were supposed to, the whole spiel. And have you ever seen a calm rage? Like a person that is so obviously stewing, but they're doing everything in their power not to lose their shit. So yeah, that's the vibe he was giving. Problem, he's really polite about it, and he was insistent on dropping us to the airport. From where he lived to the nearest airport, it was about an hour and 45 minutes. The first couple of days, we didn't rent a rental car or anything because we didn't anticipate being out there that long. And then once we decided on staying out there, he was insistent on we're family and you don't need it. Why would you waste your money on a hotel? Why would you waste your money on a rental car? I can take you where you need to go. And so in this instance, we were kind of stuck at his mercy. So we were able to get 6 p.m. tickets to leave. So like I said, we were about an hour and 45 minutes away. So we need to leave around 2-3 o'clock to get to the airport early enough. But we had just finished breakfast, still early in the morning. So we do have some time, but we're all packed and everything. So we try to convince him to take us to the airport earlier. We'd rather wait at the airport, but he just wasn't having it. He's like, well, let's go for a drive. I'll take you on one last tour before we take you to the airport. We load up our stuff in the car and we head out to go on this one last tour of the countryside. And he took all the detours that you can think of. He'd taken none of the roads that we had been using previously through our visit. After a few days of visiting, I started to learn my way around towards the town square, so I was able to catch on when we weren't heading in that general direction. And so we started to grow concerned after we'd been in the car for about a half hour and we weren't starting to see any of the landmarks or the things that we'd become familiar with seeing while we'd been out here on this visit. So I said to my cousin, where are we going? And he's, oh, it's a surprise. It's a surprise. I hate surprises. And he takes a turn down a long dirt road. So we had been on a gravel road. Some pavement roads, they were alternating between a paved road and gravel road up into this point. And when he turns, we turn down this dirt road. And so it's safe to say my sister and I are freaking the fuck out at this point. And yes, all of our family, they are well aware of where we are and who we're visiting. But realistically, the time it would take them to get from Chicago to Baton Rouge, yeah, we're heading down this dirt path and we're trying our hardest to figure out how the hell we were going to get out of this situation. And so we're riding down the dirt road when suddenly we hear this loud popping noise. And we immediately start to panic because I'm from Chicago, so I think it's gunshots. And he immediately says, no, I think we've blown a tire. We have a flat. And so he gets up and he goes out and he's kind of freaking out, like freaking the fuck out. Like he's going off, but he's walking up the road like yelling at himself. At that point, I had to buy myself to get my stuff out of the trunk of the car and start walking in the opposite direction. My sister followed suit, and we started making our way back towards the gravel road. And as we started making our way towards the gravel road, we could hear Nathaniel calling to us, "Hey, where are you going? Where are you going? Don't leave. I'll get us help." But we just kept walking towards the gravel road. Luckily for us, we were walking along the gravel road and trying to backtrack in the general direction that he brought us in. We had our GPS, but in order to follow the GPS, we had to follow the road. It wasn't going to send us through like a thick brush of woods. The only road there was actually taking us further away from the airport than we wanted to go. But after, I don't know how long we were walking up the road, it's an older black woman. She stopped by and she had a pickup truck, and she stopped by and she asked, "Well, where are you going to?" We told her we're trying to get to the airport. You know, if she could help us get to the airport. Our ride caught a flat and they're not gonna be able to get us there. She looked us over and she's like, "Sure, I'll give you a ride." And the entire time that she was giving us a ride, she asked only once, "Are you sure you aren't in any trouble?" And my sister and I insisted, "No, we're fine. We just need to catch our flight." Okay. She drives us most of the way there before she turns to us and she says, "Do I know you?" We're not from Louisiana. We're not from Baton Rouge. We don't know anyone out here. So her asking if she knows us is a little off-putting. "No, you couldn't possibly know us. We're not from around here." And she goes, "Well, who were you visiting?" And so we told her Nathaniel, our cousin's name, Nathaniel DeLeon. So she's like, "Nathaniel?" And she kind of breaks all of a sudden while we're riding in the car. And she's like, "You came to visit Nathaniel's grave?" Sorry, guys, phone died. And we're like, "Grave? Grave? Like, what do you mean?" Nathaniel DeLeon. It's our great-grandfather's name. We found out that my daddy's dad he was a pastor, but he was also allegedly a voodoo man. And he would take what he wanted when he wanted. My dad's mom was his fourth wife. Each of the women that he was previously married with all suffered from untimely, unexpected deaths. And he just so happened to come up off of those deaths. And shortly after the loss of his second wife, he started the church. Then he married another woman, and she unfortunately passed. And then he married our grandmother and had our dad. And then our dad renounced his entire bloodline and moved away and hid in Chicago so that he could avoid our grandfather's wrath. I can accept all of that, but then if our grandfather's real name is Nathaniel, and it's like, I need some proof. Maybe you are confused, lady. Maybe you have the information wrong, right? No. He says, "I can show you." When we make it to the highway, we're only on the highway for a couple of minutes, and then she turns off back down to another dirt road. And after a couple of minutes, we pull up on a cemetery, and she tells us, "Nathaniel's in there." And so we're like, "What do you mean? Like, where is Nathaniel? Can you show us?" And so she reluctantly gets out the car and she marches directly over to the tombstone. Like, she knew it was there. And we walk over to the tombstone and we see clear as day, here lies Nathaniel DeLeon, born in, I can't remember the exact date, 1900, died in, can you guess? The end of February, 1954. Remember I told y'all my daddy passed at the end of February, 2015. A lot of coincidences here. A lot of weird things going on here. So my question is, did the lady in the coffee shop know? Like, did she see him? Who was the guy that was taking him around? Who were they staying with? Who was this person that they were interacting with? Was it an actual, like, man, like, masquerading who had, like, taken over Nathaniel DeLeon's identity and was trying to convince the family? Or was he trying to harm the family? I don't know. Or was it a person at all? A big part of me, after reading that story, does not believe that whoever was presenting themselves to these two women was actually Nathaniel DeLeon. But you guys let me know what you think down in the comments. Happy Halloween. Let me know how you guys are celebrating down in the comments. If you're celebrating, if you celebrate, and why you celebrate. If you don't, you know what you thought of this story. And again, if you have a submission that you would like me to read and to share, you can send them to indayscare@gmail.com or send me a DM and I'll read it and share it to whoever's listening. Till next time, love and light.